Imagine this with me. It's a crisp September afternoon in London, just last Saturday the 13th, 2025. You've got the iconic Westminster Bridge, Big Ben chiming nearby, the Thames flowing past. But then picture that familiar, usually quite composed scene, completely transformed. We're talking over 100,000 voices, a huge roar, really, shouting for change, spilling right onto those historic streets. It's quite an image, isn't it? A city known for its quiet traditions suddenly erupting like that.
Absolutely. It's this powerful, almost unprecedented display of free speech.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. This is our deep dive, trying to untangle the layers of this, massive free speech rally right in the heart of London. We've really dug into the details, the accounts, the reports, trying to bring you the most compelling insights, the surprising links, and the actual human stories behind the headlines. We want you to get a feel for it, not just the facts.
And it's crucial to understand this wasn't just a London thing or even just a UK thing. Its significance really stretches further. What we saw there was, I think, a really vivid snapshot of these broader tensions that are simmering right across Europe. It's a reflection of these ongoing, really complex discussions about national identity, about the challenges of migration on this scale. So my aim here is to look beyond just what happened, but why it hit such a nerve, both in the UK and, internationally too. It really demands a closer look.
Okay, so if that image of a city sort of holding its breath, ready for change, caught your attention, let's really get into the scale and the atmosphere. You have to try and visualize the streets themselves, stretching for nearly a kilometer, can you imagine? From Parliament Square, past the Houses of Parliament, all the way beyond Waterloo Station, just transformed, a living sea of flags. Visually, it was striking. Red and white St. George's crosses everywhere, Union Jacks too, families marching with young workers, all sorts of people. And they were all under this one banner, Unite the Kingdom.
Yeah, a simple but powerful message.
And the sound, you mentioned the sound, the air was just buzzing, like electric. It was this mix, wasn't it? Patriotic songs, drums beating, this rhythm you could probably feel in your chest, and these really fervent slogans echoing off the buildings, things like, we want our country back, and enough is enough. You heard those a lot. The police estimate, and they're usually pretty careful, was between 110,000 and 150,000 people.
Which is staggering, really.
It completely blew away expectations. But then you had some people there caught up in it all, claiming, 3 million on social media, which seems unlikely, but it shows the feeling. It honestly felt like the city was possessed for a moment, just taken over by this collective outpouring.
That description, the sheer numbers, it really highlights how significant this was, doesn't it? This wasn't just, another protest. This was genuinely one of the largest gatherings of its kind. And London's seen in quite a while. People were comparing it to the big anti-lockdown demos or even the Brexit rally.
Yeah, those were huge, too.
Exactly. And the key thing here, the insight, is that this kind of turnout doesn't just happen by accident. It points to some really powerful, deep-seated currents, frustration maybe, of feeling strong enough to bring tens of thousands out, way more than anyone predicted. The scale itself tells a story.
So to really get a grip on the momentum, we probably need to talk about the central figure, the person who sort of ignited it. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, or as most people know him, Tommy Robinson. His background is, it's definitely controversial. He first became known founding the English Defence League, the EDL, way back in 2009. And since then, he's been constantly visible, protests, books, legal battles. He's even done prison time for various things.
He's a very polarizing figure.
Absolutely. He kind of exists in two different worlds, perception-wise. His critics, they're very quick to label him a far-right agitator. They point to his anti-Islam views, his past convictions for, fraud and assault. But then for his supporters, he's seen completely differently. He's a champion for the working class, they'd say. Someone speaking out against policies they think are damaging British culture, straining services. So what does having someone like Robinson right at the heart of this tell us about the movement itself?
That's such a critical question. Because Robinson isn't just a leader in the traditional sense. He's more like a lightning rod, isn't he? He embodies this really complex mix of grievances. His history, his way of speaking, it immediately divides people. It makes it hard sometimes to separate the message from the messenger. And we saw those core grievances right there on the placards people were carrying. Stop the boats, send them home. Pretty direct.
Very direct.
And Robinson himself, speaking to that massive crowd, he made this claim, quite pointedly. He said that migrants get better treatment in the courts, from the system, than, quote, the people that built this nation. Now that narrative, it taps into something important. For many people there, it's less about the objective facts and figures, perhaps, and more about a feeling, a perceived lack of fairness, a deep-seated belief that, their group is being overlooked, maybe even disadvantaged compared to newcomers.
And the immediate trigger, the thing that really seemed to push this specific rally forward, is Britain's struggle with this, well, significant rise in migration. It's undeniable. Like much of Europe, the UK has been dealing with thousands, making these incredibly dangerous journeys across the channel in small boats,
Yeah.
often run by criminal gangs, right? The numbers are quite stark when you look at them. Over 29,000 crossings in 2024. And by July 2025, so just over halfway through the year, it was already over 25,000. That's not just a statistic. That represents real pressure on the system.
Huge pressure.
And behind those numbers, you've got the human stories. It's important to remember that context. Many are fleeing desperate situations, war, poverty, persecution. They're coming from places like Afghanistan, Syria, parts of sub-Saharan Africa. And they're seeking asylum, seeking protection under international laws that actually Britain helped create and signed up to. It's complicated.
It is incredibly complicated, and that complexity fuels the two very distinct, often really angry sides of this debate. On one side, you have those pushing for much stricter controls. They argue quite forcefully that the system is just overwhelmed. They point to the cost millions spent housing asylum seekers in hotels. They talk about the strain on schools, on the NHS. And there's this strong feeling in some communities that things are changing too fast, and crucially, that nobody in power is listening to them.
You hear that a lot, that feeling of being unheard.
Exactly. But then the counterpoint comes from human rights groups and others. They stress that most asylum claims are genuine. Rejecting them could mean sending people back into terrible danger. And beyond the humanitarian side, there's an economic argument too. Migration often brings benefits. New workers fill jobs, sometimes essential jobs nobody else wants to do. And studies often show that over the long run, immigrants tend to contribute more in taxes than they receive in services. But here's the insight, I think. These factual arguments, however strong, often get drowned out by the sheer emotion of the debate. It becomes data versus feeling, and that makes finding common ground really, really tough.
Yeah, emotion runs high on this. Now, this London rally, it wasn't just contained within the UK, was it? There was this international dimension. A tragedy overseas, plus some really high-profile figures showing up, gave it this global feel. Just days before the rally, this awful event happened that really shook conservative circles globally. The murder of the American activist Charlie Kirk in Utah, September 10th. Reports were calling it an assassination, and the impact on the people gathering in London just days later was, well, palpable.
You could really feel it, apparently.
Yeah. The tributes at the rally were very solemn, very visible. They held a moment of silence. Someone played Amazing Grace on bagpipes. Imagine that sound carrying across that huge crowd. You saw signs everywhere. Freedom of speech is dead. R.I.P. Charlie Kirk. People were chanting his name. And Tommy Robinson actually dedicated the whole event to Kirk. He explicitly linked Kirk's death to what he called a broader attack on conservative voices worldwide. It really cemented that feeling. This isn't just about Britain. It's part of a bigger fight, you know?
And that international link was definitely amplified by the guests who turned up or beamed in. Eric Zemmour, the French politician, he's known for his extremely tough line on immigration.
Right. Very controversial figure in France.
Very. He got up on stage and drew these stark parallels between France and Britain. He talked openly about what he called the great replacement of our European people by peoples coming from the South and of Muslim culture. He even warned of colonization by our former colonies. Strong words. And they clearly hit home with many in that crowd tapping into those existing anxieties.
Wow. And then there was the other big name.
Then came the real surprise, I suppose. A virtual appearance from Elon Musk, the Tesla guy, owner of X. He appeared via video link. And he didn't hold back. He condemned the UK's Labour government under Keir Starmer, talking about a destruction of Britain with massive uncontrolled migration. He even called for Parliament to be dissolved, which is, an extraordinary thing for him to say. He got huge cheers, obviously. And that endorsement from someone like Musk, it gave the whole thing a different kind of gloss, didn't it? A sort of tech-savvy, modern edge, connecting with maybe a different audience online.
It definitely broadened the reach. But of course, we have to remember not everyone was cheering this on. Across town, there was a counter-protest. Stand Up to Racism organized it. About 5,000 people marching with banners like Refugees Welcome and Smash the Far Right. They were chanting, Stand Up, Fight Back. For them, rallies like Robinson's are dangerous. They see them as breeding grounds for hate. They often point to past violence at similar events. It was just such a clear visual, wasn't it, of how divided society can be on these issues.
A stark contrast.
And the police, they were obviously expecting potential trouble. They had a huge operation in place to keep these two groups apart. Over 1,000 Met officers, plus another 500 brought in from other forces. They set up barriers, created these sterile areas, they called them, clearly learning lessons from past unrests like the London riots back in 2011.
But despite all that planning, meticulous as it sounds, as the day wore on, as the sun started to set, those tensions, they just boiled over. Police identified what they called a small faction from the main rally, people who seemed intent on violence. They tried to break through the police lines towards the counter-protesters, and it just kicked off. Bottles were thrown, punches exchanged, and tragically, 26 police officers ended up injured.
26? That's awful.
Yeah, and 4 of them seriously hurt. One with concussion, another with a suspected broken nose and spinal damage, others with broken teeth. Horrible injuries. And at least 25 arrests were made for various offenses. And sadly, it wasn't entirely unexpected, perhaps. We've seen clashes before at Robinson events back in 2018, for instance. And there were other anti-migrant protests earlier in the summer that also saw trouble. It just highlights, again, how quickly things can escalate from online anger, from rumors, into real-world violence.
Yeah, the real-world consequences are serious. So, zooming out again, looking at the bigger picture, this London rally fits into this wider European pattern, doesn't it? We're seeing the rise of parties with similar views in Germany, Italy, Sweden, all driven by these migration debates. You mentioned Zemmour's party gaining ground in France. Here in the UK, Nigel Farage's Reform UK is polling strongly post-Brexit. And then there's that great replacement theory that Zemmour mentioned, which came up at the rally. Experts tend to debunk it as, overly simplistic, ignoring complex demographics and history.
Right. It's highly controversial and widely discredited by mainstream demographers and historians.
But it clearly persists online in certain circles.
Yeah.
It seems to fuel a lot of the anxiety we saw on display.
And the role of social media in amplifying all this is just huge. You can't ignore it. If you looked at posts on X from the day, it was this incredible mix of genuine pride from attendees, but also, frankly, wild exaggeration sometimes. People calling it a show of patriotic unity never seen before. There was even a New Zealand activist calling it the largest patriotic protest in living memory and doing a haka for Charlie Kirk. It just shows that dual power of social media, doesn't it? It connects people, builds that sense of shared purpose, but it also spreads misinformation like wildfire. Look at those crowd estimates again. It really makes you wonder how we navigate information in this kind of environment.
It's a massive challenge.
And bringing it back to the UK government, Starmer's Labour government, they came in 2024, promising tougher action on the smuggling gangs, faster asylum processing. But the boats keep coming. The pressure is still immense. It's clearly an ongoing, incredibly difficult challenge for them, for any government, really. It really underscores that finding common ground, finding solutions when feelings run this high, it's not just politics, it's a constant human struggle, isn't it?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels undeniable, doesn't it, that Saturday in London was much more than just flags and shouting. It was this incredibly vivid snapshot of a nation, maybe even a continent, grappling really intensely with its identity in a world that feels like it's changing incredibly fast. And these debates, whether they play out peacefully or, unfortunately, sometimes clash violently, they aren't going away. They're part of the story now.
Yeah, they're baked into the current landscape. And I think if we look past the headlines, past the political point scoring, what this whole situation reminds us of is the people involved. You've got the police officers nursing injuries. You've got the migrants who've risked everything just hoping for safety. You've got ordinary citizens feeling unsettled, seeking stability, wanting to feel secure about their future. When you connect all those individual stories to the bigger picture, it's clear that finding a way forward, finding some common ground amidst all this noise, it's not just some lofty political ideal. It's a fundamental human challenge we're all facing. So maybe the question for you listening is, what really stands out to you from this whole unfolding story in London? What resonates? It's definitely something to think about.